As the world closely watched, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and Chinese President Xi Jinping held summit talks in Pyongyang today. Xi, the first Chinese leader to visit North Korea in 14 years, joined Kim for luncheon today prior to the summit and attended various cultural events throughout this afternoon. Tomorrow, he's expected to make a visit to the Friendship Monument, which was built to remember the Chinese People's Volunteer Army who sided with the North during the Korean War. Not much has been revealed about their much-anticipated encounter, so let's now turn to an expert for an in-depth look at this event and what to expect from it. For that, Dr. Chang-su of the Korea Research Institute for National Strategy joins me in the studio. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you for having me on. Okay.
Now, this is the fifth face-to-face between Kim Jong-un and President Xi Jinping. Not much has been revealed, but could you pinpoint the key agenda of this summit?
Oh, there's a lot of risk because no details has been released so far, and we are just speculating. But given all the information so far we have so far, and given the conference coming up pretty soon in Osaka and some other very important meetings, we could guess they must be talking about how they're going to proceed with so-called Korean issues, because they say they're going to act for the political resolution of the Korean peninsula issues, and also how they're going to help North Korea from the economic misery, because they are facing a serious economic problem these days. And China, as a long ally of North Korea, really wants to help the people when they need it most. So I think this is a kind of giving some extra gifts to North Korea in return for the DPRK's assistance and also endorsement of Xi Jinping's policy vis-a-vis North Korea. Particularly, we're talking about the Americans' Indo-Pacific strategy versus the BRI, Belt and Road Initiative. So they are fighting each other on all over the world. So I think siding with China this time is very important. That's the most important thing for Kim Jong-un to do this time.
Now, President Xi Jinping's visit to North Korea has been foreseeable because North Korean leader Kim Jong-un invited Xi to North Korea when he last visited Beijing. But why does it come now?
Because Mr. Xi Jinping is now a world leader, and he's very busy with attending all these meetings across the whole world. It's not just coming to North Korean peninsula or Japan or the United States. Actually, what happened a couple of weeks ago, he went to Central Asia because there are two important meetings. One is SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting. It's an annual meeting attended by 8 countries, rather, including India. And also some other important, on the next day, SICA is a conference on interaction on CBM in Asia, which was also attended by South Korea. We sent a special representative to that. So these are two important meetings in Central Asia that took Mr. Xi Jinping very busy. And he has some other many things coming, most importantly, with Mr. Trump pretty soon. So that's why he just could take out some time, but this is the only opening for him to attend. As a matter of fact, he made tremendous effort to make this, promise with Mr. Kim Jong-un, because they said earlier, but he couldn't make it because he was so busy with so many other engagements.
Now, this year marks the 70th anniversary since establishing diplomatic relations between Pyongyang and Beijing. They've long been traditional allies, but there have been quite a lot of changes over the course of the last 7 decades.
Right.
Could you walk us through the path of their diplomatic ties?
Wow, for the last 70 years.
Just some major developments.
Okay, major development, I would say, after the liberation from the Japanese colonialism in 1945. Actually, before that, the two countries fought together against the Japanese, like anti-Japanese campaign and movements during the 1920s and 30s until 1945. But after the liberation of the Korean Peninsula, they actually began to have a good relationship, and which culminated during the Korean War, because China sent a lot of Chinese soldiers, KPVA. And they made a tremendous sacrifice in North Korea. And that's why they said this is a really blood-forged alliance. Even though they don't use the term alliance, they use amity and friendship, but actually this amounts to like kind of alliance and partnership between the two communist countries. So if you look at, of course, there was ups and downs in their bilateral relations for the 70 years. One time, when North Korea decided to make some nuclear weapons and other missiles. Actually, it was not in the interest of China to, just endure this kind of attitudes by North Korean leadership. So they said, oh, there's a lot of tremendous kind of ups and downs, but one thing, they have managed to save their relationship. But I think it's getting closer and closer because of the two common enemies to them, that is the United States and South Korea. And because they believe these two countries are very much stronger, and they still remain very hostile to them. That's why this is a really tremendous mover for these countries to even get closer very recently.
Now, President Xi will stay in Pyongyang for just 2 days, though, despite their, quote, unbreakable friendship. The trip will be shorter than any other past visits by a Chinese leader to North Korea. Why is that?
That's right. The first meeting, I guess, was it lasted like 13 days, the first one. And the last one was like 3 days, which is quite usual because it takes many time to visit many important monuments and places in North Korea. But this time, as I told you, because Mr. Xi Jinping is so busy with many engagements, not only in Central Asia, but also coming in Osaka, Japan, and also with the United States. And the most important thing is how they're going to make a deal with Mr. Trump at the Osaka G20 summit meeting. So that's why I think, again, this is a very difficult decision for Mr. Xi Jinping to make even 1 2-day visit to North Korea. I think, but that symbolizes how close they are and how they're going to be united against the Americans, because they said they're pushing too hard for North Korea and China on various reasons, for security fronts, technical reasons. So they want to show that we are really united in fighting against the Americans again. So this is very important symbolism for North Korea and Chinese leaders.
President Xi Jinping, in a rare move, as you've briefly mentioned, wrote an op-ed for the North Korea's ruling party newspaper, 노동신문, where he said China is happy to see a historic opportunity to resolve the Korean Peninsula issue, while stressing that Beijing is willing to draft together with North Korea some long-term plans for lasting peace in the region. What do you think would be Xi Jinping's approach towards North Korea's denuclearization?
This approach is a very recent, kind of revised version, I guess. But if you look at the fundamentals, basics of all these agreements on his announcements, nothing has changed. They still stick to the same principles that North Korean nuclear issue should be resolved by 2 approaches. One is double suspension and double track. That is, the United States should suspend all its military exercises with South Korea, but also North Korea should stop and suspend its nuclear and missile activities. That's what they call the double suspension. But then they call also another double track. That is, we should proceed with the deals on how they're going to nuclearize North Koreans, WMDs, and other issues, but also how they're going to bring in a new peace regime in South Korea. So this sounds great, but when it comes to reality, the devil is all in the details. I don't know, even though they said the opposite, they're going to work on a very detailed kind of improved version of it. But when it comes to reality, it's very difficult because the fundamentals are already out there. And if there is a kind of some improvements, that is against our South Korea and the United States. So how they're going to make a kind of detailed approach to resolving all 2 important issues. North Korea issue, that means we're not only the nuclear issues and missile issues, but also on how we are going to maintain peace and stability and eventually toward the unification of 2 Korea. So this is what traditional North Korean issues have stand for. So I think I'm hopeful, even though I would not try to be pessimistic, because Mr. Xi Jinping said out of his own mouth, we are going to work on this detailed, improved version of the dealing with North Korean issues. But I will remain a little bit skeptical, but let's see how tomorrow, if they come up with a very detailed and kind of plans to improve their stance against the United States and South Korea, then I will be a little bit alarmed, because it'll be very difficult, because for the last 20 or 30 years, they have tried their best to come up with a very good, wonderful ideas. And the best one they have done so far is called the double suspension and double track. And North Korea has been happy with these ideas because this is a gradual step and this is an actual kind of concession by South Korea and the United States. So they believe there is no other alternative but these two proposals by the Beijing leadership. But they said they're going to find a kind of new political resolution to the North Korean issues. I'm really waiting for which will come out of their announcement tomorrow. Even maybe it's in detail, not detail, but in some ambiguous, even ambiguity, that'll be okay. If there is a one step forward, and that'll be welcomed by the outside world, including South Korea and the United States. And they will have a lot of talk during the G20 meeting in Osaka.
So, although it is impossible to know for sure what kind of plan they will come up with, you somewhat expect from Xi Jinping to come up with a plan that sticks with North Korea's, but is in quite contrast to the U.S.
Yes, because they have a totally different national interest when it comes to denuclearization. Because the reason North Korea has always emphasized that they have to go nuclear and they have developed all kinds of missiles was the United States has maintained a very hostile policy toward Pyongyang. And that as long as they stop viewing the United States as a hostile country, and one thing that you have to notice is in the last years, security, national security is reported by the United States, particularly mentioned Russia and China as a revisionist power. So I think this, as long as this kind of very tough relations go between these two giants, and also, by South Korea and North Korea, it'll be very difficult. But I think some people should remain a little bit optimistic, open-minded. How open-minded they will be this time to come up with a new idea. I cannot wait to see until what they will what they will bring in tomorrow.
Now, President Xi Jinping met with Russian President last week, Vladimir Putin, and if you remember, Putin held summit with Kim Jong-un in April,
That's right.
and Putin mentioned about the resumption of the long-stalled six-party talks. Do you think President Xi could perhaps suggest to Kim Jong-un on reopening multilateral talks to resolve the nuclear deadlock?
You mean at this particular
summit?
Yes. It's not highly likely. This is almost impossible because if you look at the history of the bilateral talks issues for the North Korean leadership, they always begin with the bilateral and trilateral and quadrilateral, and of course there were six-party talks. But in the past, they said it is not in their interest to go for the six-party talks because you have so many other parties to deal with. So beginning with just 2 or 3 is much better for North Korea. I think that's why it is unlikely that Mr. Xi Jinping will accept the idea of multilateral talks as opposed to a bilateral, trilateral meetings. And if you look at the past history, because China was engaged in the Korean War, and they believe they are the signatory to the armistice agreements, and they're looking for some ways to have the kind of opportunity again that is talking about the peace treaty and replacing the armistice agreement with a new peace treaty. That means as long as you have just 3 countries, China, North Korea, and possibly South Korea, it'll be good enough, UNC. But if you have some other extra powers like Japan or Russia, it'll be very difficult for these countries to come up with these kind of specific ideas. That's why I believe they will not be welcome. They will not welcome this kind of multilateral talks, meaning 4 additional countries, including Japan and Russia, because these 2 countries, extra countries, have their other roles to play, not just this kind of traditional way. So I think this multilaterals, because we have a very different definition of multilateral talks. But by the way, like 6-party talk or even 7-party talk, including the United Nations, is something that they can hardly accept by this time.
Now, this morning we woke up to the news of the U.S. Treasury Department slapping new sanctions on a Russian firm suspected of having links to North Korea. Now, the timing is quite interesting. How do you interpret the move?
I don't know, because many people just look at the timing of this kind of new announcement. Yes, they may have some importance, but this kind of announcement has been made already. They have been ready, but they're looking for the right date. So if you put too much emphasis, too much significance on the particular date, the timing of the release of certain announcement, I think it's just too much because the road has been already there. They made all kind of arrangements. They have all the reports and all kind of evidence gathered together to reach that particular point in time. So getting too much extra significance on the timing of the announcement, I think it doesn't make much sense to me.
So we shouldn't read too much between the lines.
Yes.
All right, thank you, Dr. Kim, for your thorough analysis tonight.
My pleasure.
And that does it for this edition of News in Depth from all of us here at Arirang. Thank you for watching.